My computer delivers to me. I just received a notice from someone who's trying to put together a timeline of important events in the local food movement since the year 2000, which I found amusing because I was talking about the need to relocalize the food supply in the 1980s, so I was already tired of talking about it by the year 2000. So I'm not in a timeline, which is fine with me. I'm in too many things. So I'm not going to spend too much time on how I came to the conclusion that we needed to eat more locally. Suffice it to say that almost 50 years ago, as I began to study nutrition, I became very concerned about the problem of world hunger and the race between population and food production. It's funny to think about it now, since none of us have confronted famine, actually. But I was not alone in my concern. In 1975, there was a world conference in Rome, a world food conference in Rome, about trying to figure out how we could avoid famine. There was great concern that population was outrunning the food supply. As I began to learn how food was being grown and where, I began to realize that our increasingly industrialized agriculture, which we were even then exporting around the world, was not a solution to world hunger. Not only was it eliminating farms and farmers at an astonishing rate, but it was blanketing our croplands with a variety of toxins designed to eliminate pests or weeds, designed to fertilize the soil, and those toxins were beginning to poison our air and soil and waters. Ultimately, I came to the conclusion, I could go into a lot, obviously, but I won't talk about all that. I came to the conclusion that our modern agriculture, contrary to what was being claimed, was not going to help solve the world food problem because it was based on an industrial model that didn't factor in nature's plans at all. And thus we were damaging the planet's long-term capacity to produce food. Moreover, at the time, we were importing food from some of the poorest countries in the world, like Haiti. We were importing pork from Haiti, which I always found astonishing, and green beans from Ethiopia during the Ethiopian famine about 25 years ago. But as consumers, we were entirely ignorant of where our food came from, how it was produced, or who produced it. We were, in the words of poet farmer Wendell Berry, eating more ignorantly than any people in the course of history. So what could I, as a nutrition educator, do about that? After a great deal of thinking about it, I came to the conclusion that consumers had to begin to learn how food was produced, what farmers did, and that food was not produced in factories by food manufacturers, but was in fact grown by actual people tending the land. And in order to learn this, I felt that it was really important that eaters get in touch, being somehow in touch with the farmer. They had to have a farmer close enough to where they live that they could actually get to know him and understand something about farming, which meant, but if we were going to keep people in farming nearby, then we had to buy from them. We had to keep local farmers in business by eating what they produced, which meant that people had to learn to eat more seasonally and locally, which is not what they were being encouraged to do by the supermarkets and the owners of the giant food factories. So by the 80s, I went out and began to share this new insight with my nutrition education colleagues, whose general response was that I had lost my mind. Why would anybody do this with all you could buy in the supermarket? Why would anybody restrict themselves this way? I was totally nuts. So then they said to me, so what are you going to eat in January, Joan? I actually didn't know. I was from California originally, where we had food most of the year, and there were no labels in the supermarket that told you where anything came from. There were very few farmers markets, and what farmers markets there were in this area sold bananas and oranges, which I damn well knew were not locally produced. And there was no such thing as community-supported agriculture. But I had to find out what I could eat locally in order to walk my talk. So the only way I thought I could find out was to try to grow it. To grow the food myself and try to live on it. In Congress, where we lived for 36 years, we already had a food garden wrenched out of the Rockland soil, whose name speaks for itself. And I began to get interested in how much of what we ate I could produce there. I began keeping track of the dinners I prepared. I even had the idea that I would do a seasonal, regional cookbook, but I never seriously tried to totally regionalize our own eating until we moved to Piermont in 1995. Now that I'm in Piermont, and I say I now because my husband died 20 years ago, shortly after we moved, I farm on 1/11 of an acre, not an acre, but 1/11 of an acre in 20 beds, measuring roughly 3 by 15 feet, where I produce all my own vegetables. I can now say with confidence that you can eat locally in the Northeast. I literally haven't bought a vegetable in probably 20 years, except an occasional onion when mine run out. And in early summer, before they come in, I may have to buy an onion. And once in a while, I've bought a pound or so of Brussels sprouts when white flies destroyed mine. But I buy occasional fruit, and in December, I get a bushel basket, a bushel box of grapefruit from Florida, continuing a tradition my mother began 50 years ago, and I feel I need to continue that. But of course, there's still grain and dairy to take care of, and meat products, because I remain a modest eater of flesh. Can these be local? Many years ago, when I realized how really awful were the methods of raising animals in this country, I stopped eating meat altogether. And then at a conference in New York, I met a lovely young New York farmer who was raising cattle and hogs for groups who would pay for a regular meat order. A group of us in Piermont signed on to get a monthly delivery, which turned out to be really educational in what he offered, because animals, like vegetables, are seasonal. So lamb comes in the spring, chickens don't lay many eggs in the winter, and you learn all these things when you're getting from someone who you only get what he has. That farmer ultimately found markets near his home and dropped out. And luckily we located a group called Lewis Waite Farm up in the northeast part of New York State, which takes orders online. You can order online to supply various CSAs, in most of them in New York, and having recruited local farmers in their area of upstate New York, can deliver lots of variety every other week in the summer, once a month in the winter. Here's some of what they offer. I copied it off their list. It's impressive. 100% grass-fed, dry-aged beef raised on organic pasture, pasture-raised GMO-free pork, chicken, and duck, pasture-raised buffalo, lamb, goat, goose, and rabbit, all-natural turkey, wild-caught fish, fresh chicken, duck, and quail eggs, organic chicken eggs, bread, butter from grass-fed cows, organic yogurt, organic ice cream, etc., etc., etc. So they offer a lot of things. I'll happily give you their website, and if you're willing to pick up in Piermont, I can add you to our group, or you can form a Nyack group of your own. You need to have a group because they mostly deliver in New York City to CSAs, and he sort of stops off in the county as a favor. He started as a favor to me because I knew him. And so he comes off the thruway into Nyack, and that gas station right across the street we meet and we have a handoff. Wow. So he can go right back on the thruway and go into the city. But I need to warn you, don't do it unless you're serious. I actually had someone in my community, I was going to leave this out, but they're not here, and they're not going to hear that I said this. Someone in my community who dropped out because they said the eggshells were too hard. So you can't do that. You need to order ahead of time. You need to be willing to pay more, and you can't be lazy. If you're not used to grass-fed beef and you like a lot of steak, you probably won't be happy. I use mostly their ground beef, pork, various kinds of sausage, eggs, cheeses, and their amazing breads, which I don't believe I could live without. Okay, so what do I eat in January? Well, January isn't too hard because I'm lucky there are still things in the garden, like the kale and Brussels sprouts. And I have greens, like mâche and chicory, that survive under the snow. My winter diet is heavy on kale salad and what's in storage: potatoes, sweet potatoes, carrots, beets, onions, and until it dries out, which it's now dried out, garlic. Add to that what I have in the freezer, which always includes roasted pasta sauce, plus bags of tomato puree, tomatillo puree, and pesto, all frozen in ice cube trays and then turned out for storage. And I always have soybeans, which I believe are what lima beans always intended to be and fail. They never get mushy, they're crunchy, they're really delicious. I always have sweet and hot fire-roasted peppers, ratatouille, shredded, half-cooked, charred, frozen in 1-cup measures, fire-roasted pureed eggplant, so I can make the Indian dish eggplant burrito, which I love. And I think I've actually figured out how to preserve a decent eggplant parmesan. Depending on how good the growing season is, I have frozen broccoli and green beans. And starting a couple of years ago, I have bags of Principesse Borghese tomatoes, halved and roasted with oil, salt, and herbs in a very slow oven until they're shriveled but soft. This particular tomato will ripen and not drop off until you can pick 60 to 80 small tomatoes all at the same time and then roast them. And then it'll do it all over again. It's a wonderful tomato. It doesn't taste like anything on the vine. People come and they start to take one. I say, don't take it. It doesn't taste like anything. Together with my roasted peppers and pesto cubes, these tomatoes are the basis for my default dinner when I'm too tired to cook after working outdoors, which I was tonight, so I made it. A mock panini with pesto, cheese, peppers, and tomatoes on jalapeno cheddar bread, pressed down hard in the skillet with a bit of olive oil. A delicious, balanced meal with all the food groups if you stick in a slice of ham. I should add here that if I wanted to, I could have shredded and slightly sautéed zucchini frozen, which I used to freeze a lot of for soups, for pasta, for vegetable pie shells. But a few years ago, going against everything that I always had been taught when I started a garden, I realized I didn't actually care much for zucchini, so I stopped growing. So that's it. I draw my diet from a much narrower range of foods than most people, I suspect, but no one who comes to eat with me has ever complained that it was distasteful or boring. And I find it both time-saving and relaxing to use what's available, not to try to have to figure out which of the 40,000 items in ShopRite I want for dinner tonight. Indeed, I find going to the supermarket one of the most difficult, distressing activities I know of. Starting at one end with Thomas's English muffins, I rush past ShopRite's miles of aisles to get to the toilet paper and paper towels, and then I leave. Oh, and then next door I get non-local nuts of various kinds and local milk, which is from Pennsylvania farmers. Natural by Nature is the name of it, at the health food store next door. So that's it. That's the bottom line. If you want to support local farmers and have truly good food, it's not all that difficult to go local. Thank you.
Thank you. I suggested we hear all four speakers before we ask questions, because even our questions might be reframed by some of the other things. The next three gentlemen all owe their vocations, I think, to the woman who's just spoken in many ways. So, and I know they've all worked with Joan in one way or another. But Will?
Hi, yeah, so my name's Will Summers, and I am a farmer at the Stony Point Center, which Mark mentioned. And I'm going to tell you all a little bit about the farm that we have going on at Stony Point Center and the multi-faith community that you mentioned. So Stony Point Conference Center is this like lovely, peaceful place that's kind of, it's a 30-something acre campus just plopped right in the middle of Stony Point. So it's like in the middle of the suburban community. And we offer, conference and retreat center space. We have 180 beds, so we can host pretty large groups. Sometimes we have multiple small groups on campus. And we're providing hospitality, which means, overnight accommodations, meeting space, transportation services, and of course we're providing meals. Delicious and nutritious food is what we want to bring to people. And so that's where I come in, and actually one of our other farmers is in the audience tonight. So that's where we come in. And about 3 years ago, Stony Point Center hired me to expand the garden space that they had already created to about an acre. So we grow a lot of vegetables, mostly vegetables, and we do have a small flock of chickens, which we, produces eggs for food, but also the fertilizer is, equally, if not more valuable. And we have just a small flock because the town has regulations, and I won't go off into that, but we're doing as many as they'll allow us to do. And all the food that we grow through the course of the year goes to our kitchen to provide food for our guests. And actually one of our chefs is actually in the house tonight too, which is really cool. And so we give them all kinds of delicious vegetables to use. And we're not able to provide all the produce. I mean, we're still very dependent on kind of the global industrial food system. But we're thinking about how we can, provide our needs. And one of the little goals that I like to think of for us is can we always have something on our buffet line that came from the farm, whether it's preserved or fresh, and whether it's a jam or some tomato sauce that we've frozen. And the way that I think of providing for our kitchen is to can we produce a certain amount of things over a long period of time? So we try to we serve a lot of salad. We do a lot of we grow a lot of greens, kales and lettuces and spinach. And so I try to say, okay, how early can we produce salad? We have these hoop houses that we built, and so starting hopefully maybe as early as the end of April. Sometimes we can produce greens through through January or February. So I mean, we can have a long season of greens, and it's hard to do it in the summer sometimes. But that's kind of how we approach our production for the for the kitchen. And I just want to say a couple words about the way that we grow our food and kind of how we approach. I like to say working with the land, because that's really important to us. Like the land and all of the life that is found within it, the microorganisms, and even some of the organisms that you can see. We've been seeing a lot of worms, like electric worms, as we're turning over soil this time of year, which is really encouraging. But we really try to limit the use of mechanized equipment, and because we're only on an acre, I mean, an acre's a lot, and we have like a network of gardens around the campus. But we got away from using a rototiller and a tractor, I think last summer when our rototiller broke, and we just never went back to it. It was really nice, and we used what's called a broad fork. And it's much gentler on the soil. It turns the soil in a way that kind of allows these chunks to form, and all the, we can actually see the earthworms just kind of come up and go back down, which is really nice. And so that's, it's really important to us how we relate to the land, and that kind of leads me into, sort of what I want to talk about with food justice, because it's something that's really important to our community, to the community of living traditions. And the community of living traditions is a group of Muslims, Jews, and Christians who are all living together at Stony Point Center and helping support the functioning of the conference center. And what we also do is we're trying to, change the world. We're trying to make the world a better place and revolutionize, some of these systems that are, oppressive or unjust. And so that takes a lot of different forms, so I'm just going to kind of focus in on the food justice part of it. And so I think it's helpful to think about food justice in a way that kind of involves four things. So I think about food justice as being like a food system that's fair and equitable, that supports healthy relationships between these four things, between consumers, farm workers, livestock, and the land. So all these, those are kind of, I feel like, the four pillars of food justice, and how each of those things interact with one another. And so, when we're at Stony Point Center and we're farming, we're in relationship with the land, which is really wonderful. And we're trying to introduce our guests to seasonal food, and right now it's greens all the time, spinach, lettuce, kale. And as we go into the season, they get as they come back, they get a sense of what's in season. And that's nice, and as consumers, that's a good relationship for them. But there's a lot of things in our food system that are not visible, and I think it's really interesting to think about what's visible in our food system and what's not visible. And what is visible, in the shop, right, as Joan mentioned, right, is a lot of labels of happy chickens on an egg carton, or a farm barn, and unfortunately that's just misrepresentative of a lot of the food system. And so a lot of the work that we've done recently, and when I got to Stony Point Center and we were sort of talking about food justice and what we wanted our food justice work to look like, we weren't really sure. We were thinking, I remember thinking who are our partners going to be in this? And over the last year or two, we've had a lot of opportunity to connect with farm workers. There are two groups in particular. One is called the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, which is a group of tomato pickers in Florida who have been struggling for rights in the field. They've been organizing probably for about 20 or 25 years, and they've had some amazing successes. Maybe you've heard of them, but they have gotten corporations, instead of talking with their employers, they've gone to corporations, and those corporations have joined a fair food program that pays them 1 penny more per pound of tomatoes they pick, which adds up to between $50 and $100, maybe $150 a week added to their paycheck, which like improves their quality of life and has done a lot of, they now have water in the fields and a day off, and these kind of things that we just don't even think about being, like a bathroom in the field that you can use the bathroom whenever you want. Like that's something that farm workers often don't have access to. So we've been working with them, and they have a campaign of boycotting Wendy's right now, so you can ask me about that more later. The other group of farm workers that we've gotten to connect with, and as recently as this week, is a group of New York farm workers who are marching from Long Island to Albany, even as we speak. Or they're probably resting now, but maybe they're finishing up just here at the end of the day. And one of the members of our community has been marching with them today, and a few of us have been marching over the course of the week. And they're fighting for the same kinds of things here in New York. Especially the right to collectively bargain, the day off, the optional day off, to end abuses in the fields. These are things that are very real, and we had the opportunity as a community to host these marchers and their allies this past Monday night. Was that 2 nights ago? Yeah. And we heard from these farm workers talking about the conditions that these are the invisible conditions of our food system, right? This woman was sharing, she works in a foie gras factory. Did I say that right? Yeah. And she was describing her work feeding the ducks. And her shifts are like 3 or 4 hours on, 3 or 4 hours off, 3 or 4 hours on, 3 or 4 hours off. She never, for 21 years she's been working at this factory. I don't know when she's had a full night's sleep in those 21 years. I mean, and that's happening about an hour and a half from where we're gathered here. I mean, these are the invisible parts of our food system. So, we're connecting with these farm workers, and they are, I find them so inspiring. And it feels so good to be, to come alongside them and join them and lend our voices to their cause, the cause that they're leading. Because, when Mark was talking about, like, working together to move forward, that's, I think of, like, resilience as requiring, mutual support and solidarity and, like, forming these relationships. And so we're, so excited to connect with these farm workers and invite other people into this work. And they are calling, New York politicians right now to sign on to a bill that would change the conditions that they're in. So, if you're interested in those kind of things, we have some postcards. I even have like a dozen postcard stamps with me. You could sign it and then stamp it, tonight. But what I really love to do is this event that I described from Monday night. We want to have. I set a timer for myself. We want to invite people to join us to hear from when we have when we're hosting farm workers, and to hear to hear their stories and take action with us. And we've organized some actions at our local Wendy's and Haverstraw to support the Coalition of Jon Lee Workers. We're trying to figure out how we can continue to connect with these New York farm workers that we've just met. So if you're interested in that kind of thing and that kind of relationship building, I'd love to just, after this, you could just write your name and your email address in my notebook here, and we can, be in touch when we have these kind of things going on at Stony Point Center, because we want to build a movement of people who want to change the world and really correct these systems that are so unjust. So I'll leave it at that and pass it on to the next person.
Thank you. So Jose, as we were talking about this at the board table the other night, we discovered that a number of Y board members are shareholders in the CSA at Cropsey Farm, and Mary and I were part of a shared share last year, so it can be subdivided and so on. And we know that New York State, especially out in Long Island, is very instrumental very early on in the CSA movement. And we know that this is a county in which farming has been a critical but sometimes lost art until recently. So it's a pleasure to have you here, and we'd like to hear a little more about the Farm Alliance and the Cropsey Farm.
Wonderful. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much. I'm Jose. I work for the Rockland Farm Alliance. It's a nonprofit organization based here in Rockland County whose main mission is land preservation. What are we preserving and saving land from mostly in this county is development. That is our big issue. This county was very much part of the breadbasket of New York historically, the lower Hudson Valley. And we had quite a number of farms, and you could still see some remnants of those things throughout the county. But we very quickly lost all that land. We lost it to a number of factors. The agricultural industry in this country changed very rapidly. There was a bridge built, and people were able to live in the country and commute to the city. And it was very difficult for farmers to continue to compete in those current situations of big business, agricultural, agrochemical agriculture, which is what predominantly feeds the majority of people today. We run a CSA. It stands for Community Supported Agriculture. I do believe it was first developed in Japan, and it was a cohort of people living around a farmer, and they decided to assist the farmer and help the farmer in the time when they most need it, which is in the beginning of the season, and they pre-purchased a share. So it was kind of like buying stock in what was to come. Great business plan for a farmer. You get money up front when you most need it, and then you're able to grow the food, and you have your customers already lined up, and you're able to feed them. It's also a great model for the farmer because everybody shares in the risk of farming. And farming is very risky. If you like to gamble, maybe you should become a farmer. And we gamble and take chances all day long. Something that I've learned, and I'm a very new farmer, something that I've learned on the farm is that time is very real. And things I do now are going to have a very tangible effect in some amount of time. And that was a hard lesson to learn. There is no cramming for farmers. You cannot pull all-nighters. Things work by their rules, and some of those rules can be bent, but time is one of them that cannot. And either you have planted something 4 weeks ago and now have it ready, or you haven't. And if you haven't, you don't have it. We run a CSA of 200. We are trying for a 250-member CSA. At 250 members, our farm project is self-sufficient. It is sustainable. We hire local Rockland folks. We feed Rockland people, and we grow in Rockland soil. There are a number of invisible factors to the issues surrounding food. Some of them aren't invisible, a lot are. Some of them aren't. We just have been disconnected from them, or we're being told different things. And it can happen very simply, like the idea of local. If you go to a farmer's market, local is 250 miles away.
Wow.
That's what's considered local legally. That's a misconception at best, in my opinion, especially when you compare it to our farm, which is about 5 miles away. We grow over 50 different vegetables, some annual fruits like melons, cantaloupes, watermelons. We're slowly building up a perennial fruit crop, berry bushes, raspberries, fruit trees. We're just starting to build up a flock of chickens. And within that 50 plus range of vegetables, we grow anywhere from 3 to 6 varieties of each. Except for something like tomatoes, we have 12 or 13 different varieties. The CSA is a way that people can really eat locally. They can truly support their local economy. They can support their local farmer. And they can have a say in what happens with their land. Our organization is unique in that we grow and operate our farms on public land. So Cropsey Community Farm is both county and town owned, and it is an agricultural park for anyone to come and visit Monday through Friday, and on the weekends, to come and visit and picnic and walk your dog and do some farming and eat something delicious. It's a small crew of people that we have, and it's tough farming. It's not only incredibly hard work, but it is hard to be, how should I say, financially responsible. It's hard to do that. It's hard to farm sustainably. It's hard to farm and not pollute your land and pollute the water and pollute the air. It's hard to farm and not abuse the workers and take advantage of these things. Food is incredibly undervalued. I see prices at the supermarket, and I know that it takes much more money to produce that food than what we were paying for it. And meat, forget about it. Incredibly undervalued. And we should be asking ourselves, how do we get to that point? How do we get to those prices for those things? I studied animal science. I had a bachelor in science. I have a bachelor in science and animal science, and I studied agribusiness. And very quickly, I'd say probably by my second year, sophomore year in college, I realized that this is a system, a food system, that is completely irresponsible. Forget about ethics, okay? Irresponsible. It's irresponsible to the animals, to their well-being, and the well-being of the people that are eating that food. I very naively looked the other way when it came to vegetables, until I found myself living in Jersey City when Sandy hit. No electricity, no heat, every supermarket was shut down, the National Guard was patrolling in tanks, and I began to ask myself, what can I do for myself? It's cold, I need heat. It's raining, I need a roof over my head. I'm hungry, I need to eat. And I'm thirsty, I need to drink. What of those main things could I provide for myself? And the answer was none. None of them. And I felt very dependent. Incredibly dependent. And dependent on a system that can break, is very fragile. When the trucks don't come in or the fuel isn't at the gas station, the food is not coming to us. It's not gonna. And then what do we do? Rockland County is an incredibly unique county. I've lived in other parts of the world, in the United States, and I feel really lucky to be part of this community. We not only have a community of people that care about what's happening, land and their water and their school systems, etc., but we have land. And everything comes down to having the space to grow food. We will no longer be able to go and hunt and gather. That option for us is gone. We need to grow food. That's what we need to do. We're also very lucky in the United States because we have some of the best soil of all of the world and some of the highest quantity of that. So all of the earth is covered in soil of some form or another, but not all of that space you can grow food in, actually. A very limited amount of that space. So as Rocklanders, we should feel really blessed because we have options. But there has to be a paradigm shift. As Joan was saying, we need to think outside of what we've been so trained to having and have become so comfortable with. We are an immediate gratification culture of consumption and waste. That is who we are, whether we want to be or not. We can choose not to be, and there are lots of ways, and you see us up here, these are options that you have. But if you are going to make a change, if you are going to say, you know what, it's important to me not only how my food is grown, because there's lots of different ways that food can be grown, but it's also important to me who's growing it and where is it coming from. then you need to prepare yourself to live in different standards. We have seasons here in New York. In the winter, there are actually about 40 different vegetables we can consume. But you're not going to have tomatoes in the winter. You're not. Your chicken eggs are going to be hard. You're going to have to maybe take a hammer to them. So we have to learn how to freeze, and we need to learn how to can and pickle and dry things. Because food comes in cycles. It's not just whenever we want it. Not in the Northeast. It's not. So we can go on, and there's so much to talk about. I'm a brand new farmer. I've stepped into this sphere of a world with open eyes and completely ignorant. And there's so much to learn, but it really all starts in the soil, is what I've come to learn so far. And the soil can be healthy, or it can be unhealthy. And what comes from that petri dish, let's call it, or that medium, then has an effect on our mind, our body, and our soul. Food is our fuel. All of our thoughts, all of our actions, our words, everything is fueled from what we are putting into ourselves. And food is a very intimate thing. At least for me it is. 3 times a day, at least, I'm putting something into my body. It's important to me to have some kind of a relationship with that. And religion, race, part of the world, whatever it is, throughout all of history, we have gathered around food. It's something that we are all involved in, and we're all dependent on. So I'm incredibly pleased to be up here, to find people to the left and right of me, all fighting the same fight, and trying to do it in the most responsible way that we know how. So thank you.
Thank you. It was interesting, the reference to one of the early roots of community-supported agriculture being Japan. Masanobu Fukuoka is one of the persons who gets credit for the permacultural concept and the way in which community is formed around the process of agriculture is something I think that Jose has opened up. And I've watched Jon Rucker now for almost a decade sort of move more and more deeply into these kinds of understandings and expressions. And so his presentation is going to look and sound a little different, I think, but it's all part of this big picture of the permacultural realities. So, Jon?
Thank you. Good evening. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm really grateful to be a part of this movement, a movement side by side with my brothers and sisters here and our elders. A movement of people that understand that, we've had enough, that our current way of living and is destructive, and that we deserve better, and we know that there is better, and we have decided to live that solution, to live that change, to dedicate ourselves to it. So I'm really grateful to be a part of that movement. Me personally, I've dedicated myself to environmental and social causes for about 6 years now. 100% of my life has basically been as a volunteer, getting by, and I've had the pleasure of working side by side with actually each and every one of these people in some way or another, because that's what I do, is I show up. When the community needs something, I show up, you know what I mean? So, I need help putting up a fence or putting up a teepee, or you need help planting some seeds or moving your furniture or whatever, I'm there like that. So that's really what, what I care about is the community and our state of being, especially our children. So I'm here tonight to mention and talk about permaculture. So somebody who has been dedicated to all types of social and environmental issues. At this moment currently, I'm pretty much 100% dedicated to permaculture and promoting the idea of permaculture and the way of life known as permaculture. Permaculture stands for permanent agriculture, right? So we're creating a system of farming that is actually going to be here permanently for all the next generations to come. So has anybody here heard that word before, permaculture? So if you haven't heard that word before, I'm saying that this is a word that we all really need to know, and all of our children really need to know. Because if you look at our society, and if you look at everyone in that society, from the eldest to the youngest, pretty much 99% of us were part of the problems that we see. And we want to be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. So permaculture is a way that we can actually take care of the way that we're growing our own food, and think about what we're leaving behind for the next generations. Building something that's going to be there to give them good, healthy food. So I started out, really conscious of all the issues in our society, and that's why I got into growing food. I started working at the Crops and Community Farm the first year that farm was in existence. And we grew food for 200 families that first year. It was a really beautiful experience. But I got into that work because I wanted to be part of a bigger change, creating a social change. So after that first year of farming, they had asked me to come back and continue working there, but actually I had already gotten what I came for, which was an experience of learning how to grow my own food. I said, now I need to move on and do something else and continue reaching more people and spreading out. So me and 6 people, local people, we started the Eastern Light Project on 25 acres of land in Pomona, Rockand County, New York. And we're a group of people that wanted to demonstrate suburban scale permaculture and living as a self-sufficient community to our surrounding area. So that's what we did. We moved onto that landscape, and we grew a whole bunch of food on that 25 acres. And we had a lot of workshops, and we inspired hundreds of people by our living example. People would come for our workshops, people would come for our gatherings, and basically see how we were living. We were a group of 6 people that was mostly providing all of the food that we needed for ourselves. And we were living beautifully. We had campfires every night. We were singing music, and it was a very beautiful, interconnected, harmonious way of living. So we moved onto that landscape, and we very much we're beginners at permaculture, so we learn by doing it. And one of the big principles in permaculture is observation. You need to know, you need to read the landscape, and you need to know what it's telling you. So we did observe that there was a lot of wild food and medicine on our land too, and we began to utilize those things. So we started producing our own medicines and eating wild food a lot, and then also the food that we were planting was sustaining us. We were becoming really healthy. We were feeling great every day. We would wake up and feel a part of this whole system. That's a lot of what permaculture is about too. It's about seeing ourselves as part of the ecosystem and not separate from it. So we're talking about designing a system of farming that we're integrating ourselves into the landscape as opposed to imposing our farming system on top of the landscape. So using the natural resources that are available, understanding how they flow and how you can direct that flow to create a thriving, healthy ecosystem. So basically to assist nature in providing for you too. So we think of ourselves as part of the ecosystem, and we understand that we human beings have needs. So how do we meet our needs, and also how do we do that in a way that is also going to enhance the quality of the ecosystem too? So we were doing things on that land like human manure composting. We had built a composting outhouse so that all of our human waste was actually producing fertility for our agricultural system. And then our outhouse actually had a rainwater catching system, so we were catching the rainwater, which was also going to back into our gardens. We were designing our garden beds to the contour of the shape of the land so that the water would flow naturally and evenly throughout the entire system. We had built things called swales, which were basically big trenches that were catching water and storing it in the system instead of it evaporating, and distributing it evenly throughout our farm system. So we were doing things like that. We were washing our hands, and we would collect our gray water, basically like the water that was being used, recycled back into our gardening system and filtered into a gray water pond that was feeding our garden. So like a lot of things like that, when you're designing a permaculture system, everything that you're doing is related to the entire, interconnected web of life there. So everything is feeding that web of life in some way. So there's nothing in there that just serves one purpose. That's a big principle of permaculture, is like stacking functions. So if we're going to do something and put our time and our energy into it, how is it going to serve more than one purpose? How are we going to maximize all this energy that we're putting into it? So, that's something that you learn as a farmer. You have to be really careful about what you're doing with your energy, because you only have a limited amount of it, and you want it to create the most abundance and health and well-being that you can. So I think about that a lot. When I look at our society, think about the tremendous amount of energy that we use to, our money, how we use that energy, and our physical energy. And looking at the trends, we've been using our energy to create a very toxic situation for ourselves. So how do we redirect that energy? And that's why we need to really get on board and support local permaculture and projects like this, because we're basically teaching our fellow brothers and sisters how to be a part of shifting our energy back into the earth and back into creating a healthy community and into creating abundance for ourselves and the next generations. So it's a redirection of our energy, and it's a connection with our natural world that's really important. So currently I've shifted gears. We had to move off of our permaculture project, Eastern Light project. It was a piece of land that was going on sale for about $2.2 million. We didn't have the ability to raise that money to buy it, so we moved off. And basically I've been involved in a project now called PermaJam. And PermaJam is basically a bridge between permaculture and music and all kinds of culture. It's a way that it's a model for how we can have a celebration that channels energy into the earth, into building more farms and more communities. So basically, our first festival is coming up, and it's about a week and a half from today. It's June 3rd through the 5th, first weekend of June. And this festival is going to occur for 4 years on this land called Ricky Farm. It's a 75-acre piece of land. And the people that are coming to the festival are actually going to be participating in transforming the landscape into a thriving permaculture ecosystem. So not only that, but they're going to get to enjoy a beautiful celebration of music and culture, hiking, campfires, and a lot of great workshops, things like beekeeping, herbalism, natural building. You name it. We have about 40 workshops happening at our event, and we have about 30 bands coming to play at our event. So I realized that we needed something like this, because what's this time all about? This time I see a lot of people that are starting to become really concerned and scared about what is the future for our society. We're starting to become more aware of a lot of the issues. So what is this time all about? It can be a time of real chaos and confusion and being afraid of what's going to happen and know the world's coming to an end. Or it can be a time of a beautiful celebration that we're becoming aware of how we're living and that there's a better way. We're returning back to our roots. We're returning back to a beautiful way of life. So that's what PermaJam is all about. It's about providing that for especially our children and for everyone. A celebration of life that's going to teach you, how to be the solution. It's going to reconnect you back to the roots. It's going to open your heart. We need music. Music has been a part of social movements throughout history. For forever. We wouldn't get here where we are without music. So it's really pivotal to any social and environmental movement. And that's what I'm seeking to do here with PermaJam, is to give musicians a vehicle and a vessel for how they can contribute their energy to the environmental and social movement, play for that cause. So by showing up on this land, all these musicians, and attracting all of these people out there, we're getting people to connect to that place. We're getting people to contribute their dollars, their energy, and we're getting them to learn about permaculture and have a really beautiful time doing it, So that's what we want this movement to be about. We want it to be a beautiful experience for everybody, Not like, look, the world is coming to an end, we have to get back to the farm. No, it's like, this is our heritage. This is our birthright, you know, be here on this beautiful Mother Earth, living in that beautiful way, you know. So, you know, I'm somebody who has strived to live by that example, to dedicate my entire self to, you know, inspiring people to get back to the earth and to, you know, dedicate as much as they can to helping it, you know, to be a part of making the whole healthier, you know, making our whole family here a healthier organism, you know. So I would love to invite everybody to come out to our festival and to check it out. Website, www.permajam.com. It's a movement that's going to be growing. We actually just got back from a tour. We were touring down the southeastern United States on a biodiesel bus. So our bus even was running on vegetable oil, recycled vegetable oil. You know, we're really trying our best here to not create too much waste. And we were basically volunteering on permaculture farms and communities and eco-villages throughout the southeastern United States. And we got to see a lot of really beautiful examples of people that have dedicated their lives to living that way. And it's wonderful to see how happy those folks are too. You know what I mean? That they've made that decision to live in a natural and beautiful way. They're so happy, you know. So I got to work with them and you know, volunteer our energy, and we got to play some music for them too, you know. So we got to, you know, live our intention of giving something back, you know, giving something back to these people that are working so hard like that. And then we got back up, and we've been working on this music festival, and you know, our Facebook group has grown to like 5,600 people. There's a lot of people that have a lot of really beautiful gifts to share, and PermaJam is a space where we can do that, you know, like basically take everything that we have that's beautiful, that's conscious, that we can share to enhance the quality of life and the quality of our consciousness, to come together and bring that, you know, bring that gift forward, you know, and just come to absorb it, you know, have a great time and leave with an expanded feeling, knowing that that the energy that you just put into consuming culture, it actually went to creating a farm that's going to be there for many generations to come. So, you know, music festivals is another form of consumption, and it's a consumption of culture, and it's something that we do. And a lot of these music festivals create a lot of waste, you know. So the model that we're creating is how we can actually have these celebrations, and it's going to leave a farm there forever, for all the generations to come, you know. So this is going to be our first one. It's going to be happening for 4 years on that beautiful 75 acres. And we've been connecting with farms all over the United States. We're going to continue doing these PermaJams in places like Vermont, Florida, Louisiana, Ecuador, Peru. So we're connecting in a lot of places that want to do these things, because wherever you go, there's going to be great musicians. There's going to be a lot of people that are interested in getting back to the roots and learning these kind of skills. And you know, we're creating basically a portal and a channel for all of us to come together and do that. You know? So thank you for listening.
So we thank you to the speakers. An exceptional range of engagement around these kinds of issues. I was reminded of some other stories and possibilities. We could have had some foragers here. There's a group in Nyack that's starting to plant the borders of their property, so as you walk through town, you could eat. There are people who are engaged in planting trees all through town to improve the environment. There's lots going on, but this is a wonderful range of that kind of activity. We have maybe 20 or 30 minutes for questions for any of the speakers, and then we may adjourn, but feel welcome to stay around and have snacks and continue the conversation. But what kinds of questions and interests have been provoked by the panel?
Can we get the name of or should we just talk to you directly if we're interested in joining your group or joining your group or information?
Sure. In fact, I have with me, I can just pass it around. It's last year's, it's outdated, but it has the address and everything of the farm that you can go on the web and just get. It's called Lewis Waite Farm, and can just pass it around so people can get the name.
And there are postcards for the PermaJam up here. You can take them, and there are discounts. There are postcards related to the farm, the migrant workers walk that you can fill out and send to the governor, and there's an explanation of that. But I think we probably should also figure out some way to use the tools of the Y to continue to deepen connections too. Yeah.
If you just go online, they'll say, they'll give you choices, what you,
Okay.
and,
And what about your,
The Rockland Farm Alliance. It's www.rocklandfarm.org.
does Rockland Farm have its own? No, you don't.
Amy, did I see your hand up?
Yes, I have a suggestion and a question. The suggestion is that we might circulate a sign-up list so that, we could send all this info out over email. Just because.
oh, yeah, that's great lines, must take a lot.
Yeah. Oh, great, awesome, yeah. And then the question, I guess, is for everybody, but especially for Will, how does the efforts to sort of, it's really for everybody, but how does the efforts to live and eat and purchase more locally relate to kind of efforts to support workers and animals and land who are like part of the industrial food system? Like, what you were describing, Will, about the people that are struggling in New York State and in Florida to have better conditions, and is there like a tension between putting energy into those two things, or if there's not, how do we kind of navigate, those priorities, and how does the permaculture movement kind of think about that question too? I would be interested to know.
Yeah, I would just like to say one thing at the beginning, and that is that it was mentioned before that there's a fundamental problem that we've been taught that fruit should be cheap. And we've been taught that because there was this intentional choice made in the early part of the 20th century that we should have less farms and that food should be kept cheap so that people would have money to buy other things. It was a purely capitalist kind of thing. And it was done to sacrifice farmers. It always was. It was never possible. And that's really the struggle between the farm workers. The Immokalee workers are just amazing.